Welcome to the world of Lukas Boston. The Lukas Boston Mysteries combine a few genres that I've always loved to write. The first is the supernatural. I've written a lot of horror novels in my time, and I've started adding them to this YouTube channel as well. But these Lukas Boston stories are very different to those. That's because I've added a kind of absurd humour to Lukas Boston's various mysteries. Hopefully, you'll find yourself having a laugh at Lukas's behaviour. He's a bit of a rogue, more than a bit of a womanizer, although he's not very good at it, and he gets himself into some outrageous situations with criminals who, likewise, aren't very good at being criminal. Please let me know if you enjoyed this book, either through the comments here or on my website at grahamhaig.com.au. And also, if you subscribe to the channel, that lets me know I'm heading in the right direction with these YouTube releases. That's enough hard selling from me. Let's get on with Dead Wrong. Chapter 1. It occurred to Lukas it would help matters right now if he was wearing some pants, or anything really, rather than be completely stark naked. Most problems, including ghosts, are more easily dealt with when you've got pants on. But was it really a ghost? Someone from the other side come back to haunt him? A poltergeist intent on sucking him into the television? Could they still do that with flat-screen TVs? Lukas thought, what the hell does it matter? It was more important to figure out what to do. So okay, this was definitely a ghost, standing motionless against the bedroom wall and watching him. Lukas could see the faded wallpaper through the man's body. Still, the smoky figure was solid enough to have a recognisable face, and that had Lukas slowly groping under the bed for his pistol. It didn't make much sense to try and shoot a ghost, and the chairwoman of the apartment's owner's standards committee would give him hell for putting a big hole in the plaster, but it was the only idea coming to Lukas for the moment. Lukas had sensed the strange presence in the bedroom, waking him. Or maybe he slept with one eye open these days and didn't even know it. Lukas had learned long ago to sleep lightly, wary that someone seeking revenge might slip into his room. Plenty of people held a nasty grudge against him. Jail time can do that. Oh shit, Lukas groaned, remembering something else. He gave up on finding the gun, pushed himself into a sitting position and risked taking his eyes off the ghost for a moment, glancing at the other side of the bed. The empty, rumpled sheets were stained, smeared with lipstick and makeup. The girl who made the mess was gone. Where the hell was she? He held a hand up towards the apparition. Hey, can you just hold on for a minute? The ghost didn't move. Lukas worried she was in the bathroom or maybe the kitchen getting a drink. Any second now she'd walk back in, see his ghostly visitor and start screaming the place down, which wouldn't improve things. The chairwoman had already complained about some of his noisier overnight friends. Lukas needed to keep his missing guest out of the bedroom somehow, give him time to deal with Casper the unfriendly ex-criminal ghost before she caught sight of anything. Except, thanks to an appalling hangover, Lukas couldn't remember her name. Damn it. Caroline? Charmaine? Damn. I'm a detective, for Christ's sake. I'm supposed to be good at shit like remembering names. Lukas called towards the closed bathroom door. Hey, are you in there? No one answered. Darling, are you in the kitchen? Silence. He said, because there's this really big spider on the ceiling in here, and if you don't like spiders, you'd better stay exactly where you are until I kill the damn thing. I mean, it's a monster. Maybe one of those bird-eating things you see on the television. Still, nobody replied. It was unthinkable to Lukas that the girl had left altogether. Quite impossible. Surely no woman would climb out of his bed without at least telling him how great a time they'd had, saying goodbye and making promises to keep in touch, swapping phone numbers, the usual stuff after a night of unbelievable sex. All right, so maybe last night he hadn't been at his absolute best. Ralph the barman's generosity with the bourbon bottle had impacted on Lukas's usually smooth, cool persona. And those stairs next to the bar, hell, anyone could have fallen down those. Lucas nearly broke his fucking neck. Anyway, it hadn't stopped Clara, from coming home with him, right? Practically ripping his clothes off. He could clearly remember some of the amazing things they did. Well, some of the things. The ghost spoke, startling Lucas and reminding him he had a more pressing issue. "I want you to do something about it." The voice was whispering, calm. Lucas's answer was a hoarse croak. "Do something about what?" But the spirit had already vanished. "Great. Why doesn't that surprise me?" Lucas sighed. Shaken and out of breath, Lucas searched under the bed again, this time for his tracksuit pants, which were on permanent standby. His fingers touched the Glock, but Lucas left it there. Pulling on the track pants restored Lucas's dignity and self-confidence. A cigarette from the bedside table calmed him further. He went to the window, raising it fully open, and poked his head out, leaning on the sill and staring down 2 stories at the quiet street below. Lucas gratefully speared smoke into the clean morning air. The curb was lined with expensive cars. This was a rich, inner-city Melbourne suburb with trendy apartments squeezed onto prime real estate. It was populated by lawyers, accountants, CEOs, and a certain ex-police detective now turned private investigator, Lukas Boston. "What the hell was all that about?" Lucas asked a ginger cat curled on the bonnet of a distant BMW. The cat lifted its head and glared disdainfully back at him. Lucas heard a snapping noise along with the smack of something slamming into the wall behind him. It took a too long moment of disbelief for him to realise what had happened. Only bullets, passing that close, make such a distinctive sound. Lucas scrambled backwards, hitting his head painfully on the window frame. He flattened himself against the wall and tried to figure it out. It didn't need much thinking. This was bad, for 3 good reasons. First, Lucas hadn't heard a shot. This meant that the shooter had a rifle. It had to be a rifle, equipped with a silencer. Every second farmer in Australia had a dozen high-powered rifles stuffed under the mattress, but silencers were bloody hard to get, let alone a weapon that could mount one. So the killer knew all kinds of the right, or maybe wrong people. This was a professional. Second, now there was a large hole in the plasterboard opposite. If that meddling woman from the Owners' Standards Committee found out about it, the please explain paperwork would be endless. It wasn't enough that Lucas owned the place. The committee took its self-appointed role of maintaining a high standard of tenants seriously. It would take a very dim view of anybody who irresponsibly allowed high-velocity sniper rounds through an open window to ruin the decor. The chairwoman, a tall, imposing woman called Irene, would go nuts. And third, someone was trying to kill him. Lucas dropped to his hands and knees, crawled under the window to the other side, then snatched at the hanging cord to bring the blinds crashing down in a cloud of dust and dead insects. A twist closed them, although the morning sun still got between the gaps. Lucas waited for another bullet to punch through, the shooter trying his luck, and he wasn't surprised it didn't come. If the man was a pro, he wouldn't waste his time or the ammunition on a blind shot. More likely, he was already far away, well aware that Lucas wouldn't give him another opportunity. Not today. But to be absolutely safe, Lucas took care to avoid the direct field of fire through the window. Still unconvinced his lady guest had completely abandoned the sexual experience of her lifetime, Lucas went looking for her. In the living room, he found a note had been pushed under the front door. "That's more like it," he said, unfolding the paper and reading it. It said, "Next time I won't miss. Do as you're told. Leave the past in the past." Lucas said, "Clever bastard," and balled the page up, tossing it into a corner. It must have been delivered earlier. So was the shot a deliberate miss or not? The message could just be insurance against bad marksmanship. The paper, he knew, would be forensically clean and useless. The coffee machine needed time to boil. Waiting, Lucas stared unseeing into his empty cup, lost in thought. This was a hell of a morning. Bloody upsetting when you think about it. Surely he hadn't been that bad at sex last night. So disappointing that she didn't even say goodbye or leave a note. Was he losing his touch? Lukas sighed, deeply worried. Chapter 2. Lukas wasn't so surprised that he'd seen a ghost. When he was 10 years old, his grandmother told him, "Boy, you have the gift." He said solemnly, "No, I don't think so." But it was encouraging. Lukas was hoping for a new bicycle. The old woman bent closer, enveloping Lukas in a waft of whiskey-laden breath and stale clothes. "Yes, you do. It will take time to discover it, that's all." This was still okay. There weren't many places you could hide a whole bicycle. Lukas nodded, his face serious. "All right, Grandma, if you say so. But can you give me a clue?" Her voice shook and she raised her eyes to the ceiling. Unseen, Lukas pulled a face. This was where talking to his grandmother often got confusing. She said, "There are more souls surrounding you than those you can simply see. One day you will know how to open your eyes." Lukas repeated this in his head several times, trying to decipher the riddle. He frowned, asking her, "It's in the shoe cupboard, Grandma? Really?" He thought, heck of a small bicycle. She did this a lot, failing to notice just how much he'd grown. "Shoes, boy? What are you talking about?" It was hardly a fair question. He said, "It's okay, Grandma, I understand." It was the family's agreed get-out-of-jail response to the old girl's ravings. "Make sure you do, boy. It's not something to dismiss as a trifle." She pointed a crooked finger at him. Now it was about puddings, which was enough to send Lukas in search of his parents for clarification. They were in the lounge watching television. He told them, "Grandma's bought me a new bicycle and she won't tell me where it is." His mother asked warily, "Mother's done what?" "She said I have a gift, and I've been asking for a new bicycle for ages, so I guess—" Lukas left the rest of his obvious logic unspoken. These were adults after all. His mother said with a sigh, "Oh shit, the crazy old bat." She added sweetly, "Lukas, can you go and get me some chocolate from the kitchen, please?" His father supped on a can of beer, still watching the TV screen. When Lukas was gone, he said absently, "She's mad as a witch. Now what do we do?" His wife said, "What do you damn well think?" "How the hell should I know? She's your weird mother." "Tomorrow, George, you go and find Lukas his new bicycle." "But we haven't bought him a—" A sharp jab in the ribs explained things best. George said, "All right, but she can pay for the bloody thing." "Oh, George, you can afford to buy him 100 bicycles, 1,000 of the damn things. Just get him a new bike." Okay, whatever you say." Which for George Boston meant he'd send one of his dozen assistants, who were highly qualified in business management, accounting and financing, down to the mall to buy a bicycle. She said, "Do it yourself, George." "Yes, dear," George lied. She gave him a strange smile and said, "Or would you prefer to explain everything about my mother to your son instead?" Since George didn't understand much about his nutty mother-in-law and her gypsy-like ravings, and he preferred it to stay that way, he stuck with the easy way out. "No," he muttered. "You're right. He really needs a new bike." It was years until Lukas finally realised what his grandmother meant. On occasions he felt just the slightest whim of how his supposed gift could work. His friends and colleagues learned not to play cards against Lukas for money, because he had an uncanny ability to know what hands they held. Later, as a detective, his sixth sense, the one that all good policemen possessed, worked better than most. It was a warning system for unseen danger, and a nose for the evidence that wasn't so clear to anyone else. As for seeing ghosts now, that was something totally new and unexpected, and shocking if he cared to admit it. But still, Not exactly surprising. What gave Lukas most cause for concern was the identity of his ghostly intruder. The late Gavin Hucknall had alternated between being a petty thief, an all-round nuisance, and a hired goon who everyone knew shouldn't be given too much responsibility. Put simply, Gavin wasn't that bright. Yet he'd managed to get involved in a complex drug operation that went sour when a very large shipment of cocaine went AWOL. People got angry, and Hucknall disappeared, from a workplace environment where disappeared could be a fatal condition. Prior to this, Lukas had been riding Hucknall pretty hard, picking him up regularly for impromptu questioning, putting the pressure on, making Hucknall's life miserable. Nothing worked, and Hucknall never cracked. When Hucknall vanished, it didn't exactly create a manhunt for his whereabouts. He was just another piece of the puzzle, albeit a missing piece now, not worth pursuing. Lukas remained a part of the task force that attempted to get to the bottom of things. The criminal underworld was certainly rumbling with discontent, and heads were rolling. One particular drug dealer from St Kilda was discovered in far too many pieces for his health. His head was put in a milk crate to stop it rolling away. The code of silence prevailed, and the task force failed to unearth much in the way of solid information. Gavin Hucknall wasn't seen again alive or dead. The worst was assumed, but you never knew. Perhaps Hucknall had seen the writing on the wall and fled in time, to live in terror somewhere, hidden and very far away. At least Lukas had the answer to that now. The man was dead. But why, after all these years, was his ghost suddenly annoying him? Chapter 3. Lukas knew how to dial through the switchboard system and connect directly with Detective Senior Sergeant Peter Goodall's desk. "Pete, how's it going?" There was a short silence. "Hello, Lukas." Goodall managed to instill dread, resignation and weariness all in just the 2 words. "Come on, Pete, don't be like that." "I could be happy hearing from you, Lukas, but I'm sure I'll be feeling like crap by the end of this phone call. So what's the point?" "Sounds like you need a holiday, Pete. Long service leave can't be far away, right? And if anyone deserves it, it's you." Goodall wasn't impressed. "What do you want, Lukas?" "Oh, just some files from ages ago. Old shit. No one will mind, Pete." Goodall told him, "You know, Lukas, I'm not allowed to give you any files. Old shit, new shit, or even shit straight out of my arse I could copyright myself. You know that." Lukas understood that Goodall was making all the right noises. In the end, he'd agree, knowing that Lukas was useful to have around, and he might even do some of the police work for him. Lukas said, "You know I'll be very careful, Pete, and not make copies. I'll destroy everything when I'm finished. And it's for the usual fee, of course." No good, Goodall surprised him. "I've still got 4 full bottles hidden in the shed, and the wife's read me the riot act about my drinking. I have to slow down, or at least not let her see me on the booze." Lukas said, "So just start drinking in the shed, Pete. That's a no-brainer." "And you're a funny bastard, Lukas, and obviously not married. Tell me what you want and I'll figure out what it's worth." Lukas didn't like the sound of that, but he said, "Okay, I'm after anything you can give me on Gavin Hucknall and all that shit he got caught up in. It was a few years back, right?" There was another pause while Goodall dredged through his memory. Lukas used the opportunity to light a cigarette and noticed a butt rimmed with lipstick in the ashtray. He thought, maybe she had to go to work really early. What did she do? Christ, what the hell was her name? Would his memory return as the hangover diminished? Should he try more alcohol as a kind of crime reenactment thing? Goodall was saying, "That shit you're talking about was a big deal. It was over 5 years ago by now. What the hell do you want with that?" Trying to make light of it, Lukas said easily, I've got a lead that Hucknall is well and truly dead after all. I'd like to sort out a few loose ends in my head, that's all. Lucas could hear Goodall's suspicion over the phone when he said, "Of course he's dead. He would have popped up somewhere by now if he wasn't. Is that why they gave you a promotion just before you got fired? Coming up with brilliant detective work like that. What sort of lead?" "Sorry, Pete, I can't tell you. Client privilege and all that. You know I would if I could." Goodall coughed. "You've got clients?" Taking a drag on his smoke and sighing it out, Lucas said, "Come on, Pete. Can you help me out or not?" Goodall let him wait a moment longer. "I can't email files like that to you. The IT nerds have put filters and crap on the computers and you need to be an approved recipient or some shit. If you come in, I'll dump it on a disk for you." Lucas said, "You're a good man, Pete. I owe you." Then Goodall's voice went slightly odd and he said, "Actually, I've just thought of something you can do for me in return. A small favour. No big deal, really. A piece of cake." It was Lucas's turn to be suspicious. "Really? What is it?" "A bit of private investigating, Lucas. Right up your alley. I'll give you the address and you can drop by on your way here. Let me know what you think." "Sure, Pete. What's it about?" "Don't worry, Lucas. Like I said, it'll be a piece of cake for a man of your talents." Then Goodall started laughing. Not a good sign. Lucas knocked on the door of a small red brick house surrounded by an immaculate garden. This was an area that had survived the expanding Melbourne CBD, a nook of quiet streets and large shady trees, almost in the shadows of the corporate skyscrapers. The turn-of-the-century homes had become expensive real estate. A shrill voice answered. The door rattled, opened, and revealed a woman. She was 40-odd, with an hourglass-pinched waist that was at odds with her hips and thighs. Her ample and very visible bosom was heaving with the effort of hurrying to the door. It paused momentarily with surprise. Then the twin mounds of exposed flesh resumed pumping up and down with what Lucas could only interpret as enthusiasm. A slow and wide smile spread across her face, making him think of a crocodile that can't believe its luck when a fat antelope strays within reach. "Mrs. Shields?" he asked, holding up a library card briefly. "I'm Lukas Boston. Detective Goodall should have called, and you're expecting me." "Well, I wasn't expecting you," she said with barely suppressed excitement, moving aside. "I've been trying to get interviewed by a real policeman for days, but I'm more than happy to speak to one of their consultants. Do come in." Consultant? Lucas thought. Is that what Pete told her? Which sounded like the police paid him and he couldn't charge a fee. Bastard. She hadn't stepped quite back far enough, forcing Lucas to brush against her as he went inside. He stammered an apology. "It's Barbara, by the way," she breathed in his ear as he passed. "Barbara Shields. Please call me Barbara. Do you need to see some kind of identification of mine?" Lucas decided that if she offered to show him a distinguishing tattoo in a discreet place, he was out of there. Goodall could shove his files back up his arse. "No, that won't be necessary at all," he said quickly. "All right. First door on the left then," she said, pointing down the short hallway. Making sure it was a lounge or a kitchen and not a bedroom, Lucas hesitated in the entrance and checked. He was safe, for the moment. It was a crowded parlour room of polished dark timber tables and casements lined with knickknacks. An open fireplace wasn't used, instead holding a basket of stuffed dolls. The mantelpiece was likewise filled with ornamental china plates and photographs. Lucas was relieved to see a pair of stuffed two-seater lounges. Just in case, he lingered as Barbara gestured for him to sit, watching which way she moved. Then he perched on the edge of the lounge opposite her. She suddenly cried, "Oh God, what am I thinking?" and bounced to her feet so abruptly that Lucas almost drew his gun. Would you like tea or coffee?" No, I'm fine." He waved a hand. "Are you sure? I've got a special machine that makes excellent coffee." "That's very kind of you, but—" Lucas patted his stomach, then wondered what that was supposed to mean. Barbara looked stricken. "And I've just made fresh cake. I do a lot of baking. I'm a very good cook, among my other talents." This was said with a slow wink, and Lucas figured it might be a good idea to get her out of the room. "Okay, if you insist. But please, not too much," he said, patting his stomach again. He thought, "Why do I keep doing that?" "Don't move. I won't be a minute." The room felt much bigger after she had gone. Lucas looked around. A television in the corner was on, the sound muted. It was showing one of those talk shows where the participants admitted to bizarre family problems and the audience voted on the best solution. Lucas told the TV, "I'll swap places with you. Scotty, beam me up for God's sake." For the first time, he noticed a faint acrid smell in the room. An idea came to him, and Lucas took out his mobile phone. He wasn't adept at texting, and he laboriously typed to Goodall the message, "You are a prick, and you owe me big time, you bastard." He pressed send with only a small sense of satisfaction. Barbara returned with a tray laden with mugs, sugar and milk, and 2 huge slabs of cake on plates. She pulled a coffee table between them and fussed with arranging everything. Lucas tried to smile gratefully. The cake looked like it might kill him within minutes. Lucas took a deep breath and put on his serious business face. "So, Barbara, you've lost your cat." Barbara looked annoyed. "No, Lucas. Can I call you that?" Lucas nodded reluctantly. "I haven't lost my cat. She has been stolen. Possibly kidnapped, which is more likely." "Why do you believe that?" he asked. "Because she always comes home, of course." "I see. And how long since you've seen your cat?" "Esther." "I'm sorry?" "Esther. It's the name of my baby. She was the most famous Persian queen, and my cat is a Persian. Didn't you see the photograph?" Lucas looked around. Which one?" Barbara stood up and swept a framed picture from the bookshelf. Before he could do anything about it, she sat down next to Lucas. Their thighs rubbed. So did their shoulders when Barbara held the photograph in front of his face. The picture was of a very furry, untidy white cat staring angrily at the lens. "Isn't she gorgeous, Lucas?" "I'm afraid I'm not much of a cat person, Barbara. I'll have to take your word for it." Lucas tried to put some space between them. The sagging lounge didn't let him. Something else made sense now. The fine coating of white over everything. Cat's hair. Worse, it was as if Lucas was wearing some kind of cat's fur magnet, sucking every hair towards him, sticking to his clothes. And that smell. Cat's piss everywhere. Esther must have had a bladder that could put out forest fires. His phone vibrated with a message. Lucas apologised and took it out, struggling to hide the screen from Barbara's curious eyes. It was from Goodall. It said, "Just keep screwing her until she forgets about the cat. Problem solved." Barbara asked him with wide eyes, "Is it important?" "Oh, something's come up," Lucas said gravely. "Oh, how exciting!" She pulled a funny face and glanced at his crotch. He thought, "Don't move a muscle, Lucas. Pretend it never happened." He said quickly, "Sorry, now I can't stay long at all. So tell me, who do you think will have kidnapped your cat?" Lucas was thinking it was the number 3 bus, and Esther was little more than a stain on the street somewhere. Barbara said, "My ex-husband, of course." Lucas almost groaned aloud and thought, "Of course. There's always an ex-husband to complicate things." So why would he resort to such tactics? It seems excessive, Barbara." Barbara's bosom was heaving again, this time with outrage. "Because he knows how much Esther means to me and what she is worth." Worth? What do you mean? Lucas, my dear Esther is a very valuable breed and a champion example of her kind. It's wrong to put a monetary figure on my baby, but I suppose you could say she's worth, perhaps $7,000. Fucking how much? I beg your pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, well, it's just a cat, right? No, she's not just a cat. Esther is my pride and joy, the most precious thing in the world. Lucas hid his face behind the coffee cup for a moment. He said, So your husband will have kidnapped Esther to demand something in return. Like what? Money? Barbara's face went grim. Freedom. A quick divorce so he can marry the slut he's living with now. Right. Make that really complicated. Lucas sighed. Okay, give me the details so I can go and check this out. That's first on the list. He stood up, preparing to leave. Barbara was disappointed, but she didn't argue. She scribbled something onto a notepad, tore the page off and gave it to him, tucking it into his top pocket, standing very close. You'll find him and that scheming bitch here. I'll bet it's all her idea. Have you got a card? Card? A business card, so I can call you if something happens. Oh, sure. There was no escaping it. Lucas took one from his wallet and gave it to her. Please, Barbara, only call me if something important happens, okay? Leave everything else to me. What about dinner then? What? He asked her. What about coming round for dinner one evening? I told you, I'm a very good cook. He gave her a sad smile. I'm afraid I'm one of those people who have to be extremely careful about what I eat. I have to cook everything for myself. It's a very carefully balanced diet. I make a point of never asking anyone to put themselves to so much trouble. Barbara's face lit up. You have to cook for yourself. You live alone, at home. Lucas thought desperately, Shit. I can't go into details about my personal life, Barbara. For security purposes, of course. She beamed at his business card as if it held the secret to eternal youth. I've done courses in special diets, Lucas. You just tell me what's needed and I'll cook you up the best meal you've ever had. We really need to focus on finding Esther, Lucas tried. See? You're already turning into a cat lover too. That'll be from seeing her photograph. It has that effect on everyone. I can see that you and I are going to get on very well, Lucas. The best of friends. Lucas's fingers were flexing, imagining plucking the card back out of her grasp. Instead, he turned, hurried down the hallway, and fled out the door. Lucas's car was a battered Ford, an ex-police vehicle he'd picked up at the auctions. He could easily afford something better, but too often Lucas had to park in parts of the city where passers-by dragged coins down the paintwork of expensive cars, simply to improve their hand-eye coordination. The Ford attracted far less attention. He sat behind the wheel and took a deep breath to clear his head, getting more than a whiff of cat's piss. Filthy, moggy bastard, he growled, and wound down the window to let in the crisp autumn air. It didn't really help, so he lit a cigarette, tipped his head back and closed his eyes gratefully, feeling the smoke ransack his lungs. A voice came from behind him. Here we go again. Lucas cried out in surprise, jerking around to look in the back seat. It was empty. What the? Something in the rear-view mirror caught his eye. Gavin Hucknall was sitting behind him. Lucas fought the urge to throw himself out of the car. He clenched his fists to keep himself calm. What the fuck do you want, Hucknall? Why are you bothering me? You nearly got me killed, Mr. Boston. That wasn't very nice. You owe me. I want you to do something about it. I nearly got you killed? Have you seen yourself lately? You're not looking well. Lucas twisted again towards the back seat and still couldn't see anybody. Snarling in frustration, he turned back to the mirror. Hucknall was gone. Jesus! Lukas collapsed in his seat and rubbed furiously at his face with both hands. He forgot about the cigarette in his fingers, jabbing it into the roof of the car and bringing a shower of hot ash onto his head. Lukas swore loudly over and over, scrabbling at his hair. He had no idea what Hucknall wanted, but Lukas could guess the debt he supposedly owed was about the amount of grief he'd caused Hucknall during the investigation. Like hell he had to pay Hucknall anything back for that. But the criminal mind worked in mysterious ways. The stupid ones, at least. He had to do something about what? The drug task force was long shut down, the files closed. Hucknall was dead even if he didn't know it himself, so ordinarily Lukas couldn't have cared less. Except it wasn't so simple. He needed to find out more if he wanted to stop Hucknall's ghost from dropping into his life like this whenever it wanted. It could ruin Lukas's sex life. And any extremely important fucking lost cat investigations too. Plus, someone was shooting at Lukas. And while it wasn't definite the two situations were connected, the coincidental timing was hard to ignore. Chapter 4. Constable Elizabeth Reynolds was on the reception desk of the Detectives Division. This improved Lukas's day. Elizabeth was an extremely attractive girl who utterly failed to disguise her looks, despite the amount of effort she devoted to the task. Her dark hair was drawn back into a severe bun, makeup was scarce aside from the hint of lip gloss, and she invariably wore a deadpan expression that could turn men to stone if they missed, or worse, ignored, the message she was putting out. "Hello, Beth," Lukas said. "Now everything looks a whole lot brighter." He leaned on the countertop and gave her the smile. "Don't do that, Lukas," she said, without looking up from her paperwork. "Don't do what?" "Smile at me like that. It's never going to work, and I'm getting annoyed you keep trying it." "I'm only smiling, for God's sake, Beth." "No, you're not. You're trying to convince me to like you, then like you a bit more, until I agree to some kind of gratuitous date which you think should eventually result in my sleeping with you." She gestured dismissively, not raising her eyes from the documents. "For the record, Lukas, if this can possibly put an end to the matter, you are a very good-looking man with a fine athletic physique. That slight brogue you put on whenever you're talking to women has its moments, even if it is a bit silly. I suspect you dye your hair because it's impossibly black and shiny, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt." Still without looking up, she raised a finger to stop him interrupting. "However, none of these are remotely good enough to persuade me to become your latest bedroom conquest. For goodness sake, give it up, will you?" Now she stared at Lukas, picked up the papers and shuffled them into shape before snapping a stapler close to Lukas's fingers. He snatched his hand back. Lukas said, "I suppose sex in a hot tub is out of the question too." "Can I bring a knife?" she asked acidly. "You know people bleed out faster in warm water." "I think we should forget this conversation ever took place and start again another day. You've had a bad morning," Lukas said. "I've had a bad morning now." "It's good to know you're not being serious, Beth. Otherwise, I'd be deeply hurt. Anyway, I've come to see Pete Goodall. Can you buzz me through?" Beth's hand moved to the button behind the desk. She said, "I can't wait for the day when I can treat you like every other criminal we get in here." "Oh, I'll be playing this game for a few years yet," he said, winking at her as he moved to the door. "Damn it, Lukas, did you just wink at me?" She hefted the stapler again. Lukas hurried through the security door into the large open-plan office where the branch's detectives worked. The truth was that Lukas wasn't really fired from the Victorian police force. He'd resigned before they kicked him out. In the process, he'd racked up a ton of brownie points with many of his colleagues, because an unpleasant scandal had been about to break out and a lot of people were in the firing line. At the time, Lukas was in a funk about his career, and on an impulse he chose to take the brunt of the blame, saving everyone a heap of trouble. The sacrifice was quietly acknowledged, deals were cut, and Lukas escaped with little more than a slightly soiled reputation. The union even got all his wages and entitlements paid, which he didn't really need thanks to his father's investment portfolios, given to Lukas when his parents fled the city in search of sunshine, cold beer and retirement. The scandal was soon forgotten, replaced by the next one. This was why Lukas could walk into the detectives' division with impunity any time he liked, ask for favours that irritated people, and essentially still act and behave like a fully paid-up member of the police department. He told Pete Goodall, "You're an asshole," and dropped into a chair on the other side of the detective's desk. "That Shields woman is a man-eating monster. I almost had to come here to file rape charges." "Did you do her?" Goodall asked, leaning back. His chair creaked under the weight. Goodall spent too much time at his desk. Most of his hair was gone and the remainder was a dirty grey. He avoided fitness reports at all costs. "No, I bloody didn't. And I never will unless I've got a death wish. Have you seen her?" Goodall was smug. "Got a look at her when she came in the front desk the other day, so I made sure no one put her file in my tray. Then some clever bastard transferred her phone calls through to me, and it's been like phone a fucking friend every day demanding I go looking for her fucking cat. In fact, she called again just a few minutes ago. Mrs. Shields is very pleased with the new arrangement. She certainly likes you." He grinned. "Barbara assures me she already has your contact details, but I made sure all the same." Lukas went white. "You didn't give her my home address?" "No, not yet. But you know, since you're working on Mrs. Shields' case file, perhaps I should give it to her anyway." "I guess you're just amusing yourself, right?" Lukas said uneasily. "Having a laugh." Goodall shook his head slowly. "Lukas, I know the whole wavy hair, green eyes thing gives you a free shot at all the beautiful women around, but as a public service and for the sake of charity, you should be spreading a little of your stud-like love with the Barbara Shields of the world too." Goodall thumped himself in the chest. "So I've taken it upon myself to ensure that happens." Lukas said flatly, "I've got a better idea. Why don't you sleep with her? It looks like you need the exercise." "No, I can't," Goodall said mildly, reaching for his coffee. "I'm a happily married man." Lukas said, "I'll bet if Barbara Shields looked like Cameron Diaz, your happy marriage would be conveniently forgotten." Goodall frowned at him. "Let's not get morals confused with shit like that. My Jackie would leave me for George Clooney in the blink of an eye too. It's all relative when it comes to your relatives, right?" Goodall didn't wait for an answer, taking a computer disk out of a drawer and dropping it in front of Lukas, gesturing that Lukas should hide the disk quickly. "That's everything I can give you. I suppose this is the result of last week." "Last week?" Lukas asked, sliding the disk into his jacket, jamming it into a pocket. "With Munro falling off the perch. Have you heard something?" "Damn, I didn't even think about that," Lukas said, truthfully. It was even odd, considering the morning he'd had. Charles Chuckles Munro had been the leader of the same criminal organisation involved in the failed drug deal 5 years before. Gavin Hucknall had even worked for Munro. 2 weeks earlier, Munro had died of a heart attack. In the obituaries, the press painted Munro as a prominent business figure, since it still made sense not to upset the family and friends who someone who collected his overdue debts with a cricket bat. Munro had ruled with an iron fist over a widespread and nasty collection of thugs, pimps and dealers. The mobster had been at the heart of Lucas's investigations and most likely responsible for much of the death and violence linked to the purge following the missing drug shipment. Lukas wondered, could Munro's death be somehow causing Hucknall's sudden appearance? Goodall broke into his thoughts. "So, what have you heard?" "What?" Lukas said. "What have you heard? About Munro and all that shit?" Goodall pointed at the disc in Lucas's jacket. "You must have heard something, Lukas." "No, not really," Lukas said, standing up. "I'm only thinking it's a bit easier to poke at a few old bears now that Chuckles is in the ground." Goodall peered at him, smelling a rat. Why? You're not a policeman anymore, and it's not your problem. Lukas shrugged. Well, okay, there is a third party interested in doing some digging around again, now that he's gone. Lukas didn't want to admit it was him. Goodall said, hoping to find the drugs, after all this time. Lukas shrugged again. It's the buried treasure of the underworld, Pete. The fabled lost drug shipment of Chuckles Munro. People will always be searching for it until somebody finds the damn thing. No surprise, someone is willing to pay me to have another look, so why not? Goodall narrowed his eyes. Who is willing to pay you? Sorry, Pete, can't say. You mean you won't say? No, I can't say. What a load of shit. You'll keep me in the loop all the same. You're my best friend forever, Pete, you know that. Now I know you're lying. Piss off then. Lukas left, feeling he'd come out on top, until Goodall called after him, Don't forget to give Barbara my best, and give her your best while you're at it. I'm going to find the bloody cat, Lukas said unhappily over his shoulder. Easy fixed. Goodall burst out laughing. Back at the reception desk, Lukas leaned close to Beth when she wasn't looking. How about dinner tomorrow night? He asked, making her jump. Good idea, she said, recovering. Come around at 7. Wear a dark shirt so you won't see the holes after the taser prongs are pulled out. Are you an organ donor? Absolutely. I've given my heart to you, Elizabeth Reynolds. I think I'm going to be sick. Just hold that thought, Lukas said, walking away. I'm holding down my bile instead. Don't wink again. No, don't. You bastard, Lukas. At his car, before getting in, Lukas couldn't help checking the back seat for signs of Hucknall. He realised looking through the windows wouldn't work, so Lukas began peering into the wing mirrors, walking in a crouch around the car and trying to find the best angle. A constable asked as she walked past, Are you thinking of buying it, Lukas? Looks like a pile of shit to me. As a matter of fact, I already own it, Lukas said. Then the car crushes in the next yard, she said without stopping. Very funny, Lukas called, but not too loudly, because she looked damn good from behind. It stinks in here, came Hucknall's voice from inside. Although he couldn't see anyone, Lukas jerked the back door open. Back again. You always bitched about the smell in my car, so get out. Find your own bloody way home or wherever it is you hang out when you're not haunting me. There was no reply. More self-consciously, Lukas again attempted to see the interior using the mirrors. Giving up, he got into the driver's seat and used the rear view. The back seat was empty. Lukas said softly, You always bitched about that. So are you really talking to me, or just echoing the past? He thought, I can't remember Hucknall ever mentioning any damned debt or that I owe him anything. Then again, Lukas hadn't listened too closely, because Hucknall never really said anything he wanted to hear. It had been like interrogating a brick wall. Chapter 5. 5 years earlier, during the investigation, Lukas had always believed that one person knew more than she was prepared to say. Hucknall's girlfriend, Grace Chadwick. Perhaps with Chuckles Munro in the ground, she might be more willing to give up some secrets. Lukas figured it was worth asking. He had nothing to lose. The Grace Chadwick that Lukas remembered was nearly 30 years old, looked something like 50, had a thin, ferret-like face to match her wiry figure, and she put on a fierce expression for everything. Even sucking on the cigarette, held permanently in her nicotine-stained fingers, rated a moment of furious concentration. Tattoos on her arms and legs weren't a good look on her thin limbs. A spider's web of blue ink crept up her neck. The artwork and the flesh were invariably on display, thanks to Grace's liking for sleeveless tops and denim miniskirts. She also preferred thongs on her feet, flattened and worn down to a wafer of rubber. Things had changed. The Grace Chadwick that met Lukas in the doorway of a neat caravan, greeting him through a flywire screen, wore colourful slacks, a lace blouse with long sleeves and high neck, and clean white sandshoes. He hardly recognised her. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked, flashing a smile of crooked teeth which had been scrubbed and bleached to a semblance of health. The habitual grimace of anxiety had gone too, he noticed. "Grace, it's Lukas Boston. You knew me as a detective back when Gavin was being investigated. Remember me?" She peered at him. "Oh, I thought you looked familiar. I try not to think about those years anymore. It's too distressing, you know. What do you want?" Distressing. That might explain the gobs of phlegm she'd been spitting at Lukas the last time they met, screaming at him to fuck off and leave Hucknall alone. "I understand, Grace," he said. "Really, I do. Still, can I have a word?" Lukas was on the back foot momentarily. He'd half expected to discover Grace was long dead from an overdose or after choking on her own alcoholic vomit. "If you like," she said. "Wait out there and I'll pop the kettle on. Harry won't be too far away." Harry? Who the hell was Harry? Lukas had been given the address of the caravan park by Grace's last parole officer. The park manager told him which numbered lot. Beyond this, Lukas knew very little about Grace Chadwick now. It wasn't inconceivable that someone other than Hucknall found her attractive. Lunatics were everywhere these days. He was standing inside a canvas annex with a carpeted floor and folding chairs neatly arranged beside tables. This was a permanent caravan site, the van chocked up off the ground. Then Lukas noticed that Jesus had moved in for good too. Framed prints on the walls depicted biblical scenes with plenty of halos in evidence. A small Weeping Mary statuette lurked in the corner. Grace squeezed out the door, making sure Lukas didn't try to slip inside. "It'll take a few minutes to boil," she said, herding Lukas to sit in one of the chairs. Lukas wasn't comfortable. He'd much rather deal with the spitting, abusing Grace than this strange creature. Maybe she was saving her spit for his cup of tea. Too late, he hadn't refused one. He lowered himself carefully into a sagging camp chair. She said, "I've been half expecting a visit from someone like you." "Why? Because Chuckles is dead?" Lukas asked. "What? Who?" For a moment, the screwed-up face almost returned. Lukas told her, "Charles Munro is dead. Didn't you know?" Grace was surprised. "No, I didn't hear. God rest his soul, although I suppose there's no chance of saving him now. He needed saving, though. Do you need saving, Mr. Boston?" "From what?" Lukas asked innocently. Her eyes narrowed. "Ah, ignorance, the worst sin. It's never too late while you're still breathing. That's what we say." "Speaking of which, can I smoke?" Lukas asked, and started to pull a packet out. She said quickly, "I'd rather you didn't. We can stand outside if you like. In God's plain sight." Her fingers quivered slightly, as if clutching an invisible cigarette. Lukas glanced up at the roof, silently questioning how the sagging canvas might hide sinning smokers from any god on the job. He left the smokes in his pocket. Instead he said, "Why were you expecting me?" "After Gavin's visit, of course. You people were always harassing him back then. You were one of the worst. I don't expect things to be any different now. You've tracked him down to here, of course." "After Gavin's visit when?" Lukas asked. "A week ago, I suppose. Walked in here bold as brass and wanted to see me like nothing had ever happened. He got quite upset when I told him about Harry. There was a bit of a scene and he left. I said we could help him reach out to the Lord, but that just upset him more." Grace shrugged. Lukas jerked upright in his seat, which threatened to tip over, and he waved his arms to keep his balance. "Shit! Gavin was alive a week ago, you say?" "Was alive?" Grace blinked at him. "Well, I mean, we all thought he was dead, right?" Lukas corrected himself hastily. There was no point in telling Grace that Gavin's resurrection was short-lived, or especially how Lukas knew this. "I thought the same," Grace admitted, sounding like she'd already lost interest. "Hardly recognised him. Thin as a rake and head like a bowling ball, you know, shaved clean." "Did he say where he'd been living? hiding all this time?" "Nah, we didn't talk about anything like that. As soon as he saw how happy I am now, he just got angry." They were interrupted by a short, thick-set and overweight man walking into the annex. A crown of curly hair laid siege to a shining bald spot. He peered at Lukas through heavy glasses, then took them off and studied Lukas again. "Hello, who's this, Grace? A new lamb to our flock." He snatched up Lucas's hand and pumped it enthusiastically. "Welcome, welcome, my friend." Grace explained unhappily, "This is a policeman who's come to ask about Gavin, Harry." Harry abruptly dropped Lucas's hand and only just stopped himself from wiping his palm on his trousers. Lukas struggled to stand up, fighting the camp chair again. "Lukas Boston," he told Harry, going through the motions of finding his wallet for identification before giving up. Since Grace had made the mistake of thinking he was still a serving detective, it wasn't strictly necessary to correct her. "I'm Harry Upton," the man said. Harry was familiar to Lukas, but his name didn't match the vague memories. Lukas was certain that Harry had something to do with Munro's organisation in the past. It appeared Grace didn't stray too far from the fold when it came to her love life. Lukas said, "So you had an unexpected visitor, I hear." "Not for long. We offered him a new beginning, but he wasn't interested. Gavin took off soon after that." Lukas gestured at the caravan park outside. "I don't understand. Is this some kind of religious place?" "No, it's just us who know the truth, but we're spreading the word here. It's our mission," Harry said, matter of fact. At that moment, Harry caught sight of someone walking past. He called out, as if to demonstrate to Lukas, "Peace be with you, brother." A voice floated back. "Piss off, you god-bothering freak." Harry shrugged at Lukas. "He's a challenge, that one. But he's coming around." Harry and Grace both wore false smiles now, waiting for Lukas to get the message. Bland, "we're not going to tell you anything" smiles that Lukas knew so well. He considered pressing them harder, maybe for emphasis even kicking over the damned camp chair. The downside would be revealing just how keen Lukas was to get fresh information. It was better to play his cards close to his chest. Besides, Lukas already had his one utterly surprising new fact. Until something like a week ago, Gavin Hucknall was definitely alive. "All right, that's all I need for now. But I might have to come back and ask a few more questions," Lukas said. "Sorry I don't have time for the tea." "Special brew it is too," Grace said. "I put in my secret ingredient." "Yes, I can imagine. Maybe next time, thank you, Grace." Harry said, "Why don't you come back on Sunday? We can take you to one of my meetings. You'll enjoy it." "Your meetings?" Lukas asked. "In my church. I'm the pastor of the House of Hope." "Seriously? You mean like a real pastor?" Harry's smile faltered. "No one questions my spiritual authority." "Right," Lukas said doubtfully, backing out of the annex. This place was getting crazier by the second. He nodded at Grace. "I'm glad to see this has turned your life around, Grace. Congratulations." "I've been born again, Mr. Boston. No more sinning for me." Lukas slowly took out his cigarettes, lit one up and savoured the first drag. He told her, "Believe me, you're not missing a thing." It was Grace's turn for her smile to slip, her bottom lip trembling, the nicotine-stained fingers twitching again. Chapter 6. Lukas had promised he would visit Barbara Shield's husband, and he might as well get it done. Go and see if he was in illegal possession of a certain cat. It was a long drive out to the M31 in the far northern suburbs, and Lukas often glanced in the rearview mirror to see if he had a ghostly passenger. Perhaps Hucknall could explain how he'd been alive for the past 5 years and gotten away with it. Chuckles Munro would have been leaving no stone unturned searching for him, if only for the fact that Hucknall's unexplained disappearance must have been damning. Assuming now it wasn't something of Munro's doing that convinced Hucknall to go missing in the first place. Lukas muttered aloud, "It changes everything." and looked again to see if it prompted an appearance in the back seat. Nothing happened. Lucas muttered, "Just as damned hard to pin down when you were alive." Mick Shields lived in a modern street with all the homes boasting perfect gardens, showroom-designed houses and paved double driveways leading to roller-door garages. Lucas figured that on a summer evening you'd go deaf from the sound of water sprinklers. He parked halfway on the grass and heard something crunch under one of his tyres. Lucas got out and checked. A part of the reticulation system was smashed. "Sorry," Lucas told it insincerely, and went to knock on the front door. No one answered. He looked around, searching the street. It was a sunny day with blue skies, but nobody was outside. Lucas wandered casually down the side of the garage and found a small gate into the rear yard. It wasn't locked and he slipped through, making sure the gate didn't crash closed behind him. It was a typical backyard, devoid of any mess from children or pets. A square of grass hosted a clothesline, a tiny shed for keeping tools, and a fence line with a token bed of flowers. And a man with a baseball bat. Lucas saw the bat coming in a window reflection. He ducked and yelled, "Hey, what the hell?" The bat slapped into the brickwork, chipping off a chunk. Someone snarled a curse. Scampering sideways, Lucas saw his attacker was short and chubby. He might have been related to Harry Upton, and wearing a t-shirt and large shorts that ridiculed his legs. His wide face was grimly determined, the bat raised for another blow. "What the hell are you doing?" Lucas asked him, edging further away. "Getting you before you get me," the man cried in a thin voice. "I know why you're here." "No, you don't," Lucas said, holding up his hands. "I don't give a shit what you say. You're trespassing anyway. I'm entitled to defend myself. If you just stand still, I'll just break your legs or something. Does that sound fair?" "Or something?" Lucas asked. A woman's voice piped from the house. "Just hit him, Mick. For fuck's sake, stop mucking around." "Shut up, Jules. I know what I'm doing." He said again to Lucas, "I'm allowed to defend myself. It says so on the internet." "So am I," Lucas said, and drew his gun, pointing it at the man's head. "Shit, that's not fair," Mick Shields said in a wounded voice. "I've only got this." He patted the bat. "You don't bloody need it. Put it down. I don't know what you think I'm doing, but I'm only here looking for your wife's damned cat." "My what?" "Your wife's bloody cat, okay? It's missing," Lucas said. "Esther? Why would she be here? This is bloody miles away from home." Mick lowered the bat. Lucas figured it was safe to holster his Glock. "She reckons you've kidnapped the cat to demand a ransom." "Why the hell would I do that? I've won the lottery." Mick turned pale. Lucas stared at him. "Say that again." I won the lottery a few weeks ago. Shit, shouldn't have said that." Mick slumped as Lucas asked him, "Is that why you left Barbara?" A woman burst out of the house. She looked remarkably like Barbara Shields. She said quickly, running across the lawn, "When Mick says he won the lottery, he means me. I'm as good as winning any silly lottery." She went to Mick's side. He dropped the bat to give her a hug, then they exchanged a telling glance. Lucas said, "Yeah, and how much money?" Mick looked sheepish. $600,000. "So you want a divorce before Barbara finds out you've got an extra $600K in your wallet?" "Well, there is that," Mick nodded. "Look, I never want to see her again, so I'm not going to do anything stupid like pinching the fucking cat, am I? Besides, the bastard's a walking fur factory. You've seen that for yourself." He nodded at Lucas, who rubbed self-consciously at his cat hair-covered coat. "Who are you, anyway?" "I'm Lukas Boston. I'm a private detective. Barbara's hired me to find Esther." "Who are you?" he asked the woman. "Abigail," she said, grabbing Mick possessively. "Are you Barbara's sister?" Lucas thought this might explain a few things. "You cheeky prick." "Okay, apparently not." "You honestly haven't got the cat here?" Lucas asked. Mick said, "It's probably gone under a bus somewhere." Lucas didn't say this had been his first theory too. He sighed. "All right, I had to check." This had been a total waste of time and tyre rubber. Lucas considered apologising for the ruined lawn sprinkler and figured the baseball bat thing made them even. He turned to leave. Mick said, "You won't tell her about the money? I've already got every bastard I've ever known my entire life coming here and trying to get their hands on it somehow. For God's sake, don't tell her." Waving over his shoulder, Lucas said, "No, let's say you owe me one, okay?" Lucas wasn't serious. It was a force of habit. Mick said uncertainly, "Fair enough. Give me a call." "What do you do?" Lucas asked as he opened the gate. "I'm working for an undertaker these days," Mick said. "Oh, definitely useful," Lucas grunted. Lucas went home to change his clothes and remove the stench of cat's piss and fur. He parked in the street, ignored the elevator and took the stairs 2 at a time, and let himself inside where he got changed and bundled his clothes into a plastic bag. He briefly considered dumping them before deciding against it. While he was still searching for Esther, the probably very flat cat, and needed future visits to Barbara Shield's home, he needed to own some cat clothes. He could ditch them at the end of the case. "It's not a case," Lucas told himself. "It's a missing damned cat." He cursed Peter Goodall. It didn't help. Eating something might improve his mood. Lucas made a thick burger from 2 frozen beef patties, slices of cheese and a fried egg, washing it down with a can of Coke and a cigarette. In all, his lifespan was shortened by several months, but Lucas felt fortified enough to try another 5-year-old lead. There was somebody else Lucas knew who might have gotten a recent visit from Hucknall. Stepping out of the building, Lucas saw 2 men leaning on his car, waiting for him. They were both large, wearing dark suits and sunglasses, and instantly wary when Lucas appeared. Lucas called, slowing down, "Looking for aliens? There's a woman around here called Irene who is definitely from another planet. You should check her out." Reaching for his Glock wouldn't be a good move. They'd be expecting it. Lucas's eyes slid to the footpath, wondering if he should run for it, albeit a temporary solution since they knew where he lived. Still, these guys were fat, and outrunning them shouldn't be hard, as long as nobody started shooting. One of the men smiled sadly and wagged a finger at Lucas, knowing what he was thinking. Footsteps from behind told Lucas they were well prepared. Chapter 7. The back of the wooden chair cut into Lucas's arms. His bound hands were pulled too tightly behind him. His feet were going slightly numb from the tape attaching his ankles to the chair legs. The blindfold stank of grease and engine oil. They'd taken off his jacket and shirt, supposedly to search him for weapons, but Lucas was bracing himself for something a whole lot more painful than cold hands on his bare chest. The air chilled him. It was the least of his worries, he knew. A scuffling noise behind made him turn his head, then the blindfold was ripped off. Lucas blinked in a pale glow. Above him a single light swung from its cord, throwing the rest of the room into complete darkness, but he could sense the emptiness of a large space, a disused garage or warehouse. He squinted up at the light, even though it would ruin his sight more. Lucas said to the gloom, "Come on. Really? You've been watching too many movies." "Shut your smart-ass face if you want to stay alive. Besides, it's one of them economy globes. The last electrical bill was a bastard." "Oh, well that makes perfect sense then," Lucas said. The voice was familiar, and Lucas tried to put a name to it. A man came closer into the circle of light. "Birdie Curran," Lucas said wearily. "What is it? Parole, or did you escape from somewhere? Escape without nearly killing yourself this time, I mean." "Parole for good behaviour," Curran told him. "Something you're not going to see much of today, I can promise you that. Don't forget, you still owe me for these, you bastard." He held up a left hand to reveal 2 amputated fingers. "I warned you not to bite your fingernails. You can hardly blame me." "You might not feel so funny when I even up the score," Curran said, pretending to snip off the missing fingers with his other hand. "Snip, snip, and we'll call it quits, okay?" Lucas was feeling a cold anxiety in his stomach. Birdie Curran was a small-time thug operating on a single brain cell, the kind of man capable of doing some very stupid things without thinking through the consequences, such as trying to climb a razor wire fence when Lukas was chasing him, which accounted for the lack of fingers. It also meant Curran just might start chopping into Lucas's hand to satisfy some kind of twisted concept of revenge, even though the man had panicked and run, then attempted to climb a fence designed to cut a man to shreds. It was hardly Lucas's fault he left some body parts behind on the wire. Unfortunately, common sense wasn't Birdie's strong suit. Lukas said carefully, "I don't think your boss would like you doing that. If I wasn't needed in one piece and fully functional, someone wouldn't have gone to all this trouble." "What makes you think I ain't the boss?" Curran shuffled nearer, angrily thrusting his beak-like face at Lukas. He resembled one of the chickens that Curran had looked after during his first prison stretch, earning him the nickname. "Jesus, Birdie." Lukas turned his head away from a stench of foul breath. "Give me a break." "How about I break your face?" Curran punched Lukas hard in the belly. Lukas strained to suck in air, whooping with the effort, the chair rocking. Finally he spat out, "Failed anatomy classes too, Birdie." Curran glared at him, trying to fathom the word. He grinned, figuring it out. "I couldn't give a shit about any planets or the moon and crap, but you'll be seeing stars soon enough." He enjoyed his own joke. Lukas sighed and gave Curran a disappointed look. Curran moved closer again, bunching his good fist. A soft, female voice came from the darkness. "That will do, Birdie. Leave him alone." Curran instantly stepped back. "I didn't hurt him, miss. Just a little tap in his fat guts." "I'm glad to hear it, Birdie," she said. Lukas was glad to hear her say this too, until she added, "That's my job. I don't want you spoiling my fun. Birdie, go and wait outside and make sure no one comes in. This needs to be a private conversation." "Are you sure, miss? He's a slippery prick, this one." "I'll be quite safe, Birdie." A phone began ringing. It was Lukas's, unless someone else in the world used the Macarena song for a ringtone. One day he'd figure out how to change it, or maybe sleep again with the funny bitch who somehow permanently programmed it into his phone. Sorry," he said to the darkness. "So you should be." "Really? The Macarena song? Jesus." "Birdie, answer that, will you?" Curran went to Lucas's shirt and jacket on the floor, picked out his phone and took the call. Lukas winced at what might come. "This is Lukas Boston's phone." "No, sorry, he ain't taking any calls. He's a bit tied up." "Oh, you're hilarious," Lukas hissed. Curran waved at him to be quiet. "A cat, you say?" "No, he hasn't got no cat with him." "A Persian?" "No, he's got no rugs with him either. I once wrapped a bloke up in a nice Persian rug, though. Hang on, I'll see if I can ask him." Curran pressed the phone to his chest. "Any progress in finding this woman's cat?" "No, nothing yet," Lukas said through his gritted teeth. Curran told Barbara Shields grandly, "Investigations are ongoing, but we've got some promising leads." "No, we haven't, you cock," Lukas said. "I'll pass on a message," Curran said, and broke the connection. "Why did you tell her that?" "That's what you always say, right?" Curran sounded hurt. "No, you fool. You just say, 'Oh, never mind.'" The woman said, "Time to leave, Birdie. Fly away and off you go." "Are you sure, miss?" "Yes, I'm bloody sure." She was getting impatient. Curran's footsteps dragged away into the distance. A square of light briefly showed, a door opening in the side of the building, and Lukas got a quick glimpse of a large empty warehouse with a raised mezzanine office area against one huge wall. The door clanged shut. "I'm assuming you're my host," he said. "Any chance of turning on the air conditioning? It's freezing in here." Julie Munro walked into the light and studied Lukas. He studied her back. In particular, the tight jeans and low-cut tank top that revealed some very impressive bits of Julie Munro indeed. Lukas wasn't sure where to look. It was all excellent viewing. Her hair was cut in a short, boyish style and coloured white. Lukas wasn't big on the latest hairstyles, but he looked all the same, for all of about 3 seconds. Then his attention returned elsewhere. "My, haven't you grown up?" he said. The last time Lucas saw Julie Munro was 5 years ago, a petulant 20-year-old sulking in the corner of the watch house after being arrested for possessing a few grams of cannabis. They'd let her stew for several hours before dropping the charges and sending her away. Annoying the daughter of Chuckles Munro with a trivial charge wasn't worth the grief it might cause. Besides, there was more merit in the small favour of letting her go, scoring points with her drug lord father. "I'd hardly call you old or fat, Lucas Boston," she said, trickling her fingers over his midriff and smiling at him flinching. It gave Lucas a chance to look down her top. She knew it, arching an eyebrow at his impudence. "He didn't say old," Lucas told her. "He didn't have to. You're at least 100 years old, aren't you?" She slid out of sight, circling around behind him. "I thought you weren't going to torture me. That's a cruel thing to say." "No, I haven't decided how much I'm going to hurt you yet. It depends on how well you behave." She came in front of him again. "I trust that Max gave you a comfortable ride here." "Which one's Max?" Lucas asked. "The biggest one." "He smells bad. At least, I think it was him, since they all stank." "You don't want your bodyguards smelling like lavender, right?" Lucas said, "Well, just any kind of soap would be a start. Say once a month." "Maybe I should use some to wash out your ungrateful mouth." Their eyes locked. She broke the moment by bending forward and playfully touching the tip of his nose with her finger. "You're funny. I like funny men." "Okay, good," Lucas said. "Before we have a big laugh together, let's start with what you want, shall we?" Lucas was trying not to stare at her breasts again. It didn't help that they were right in front of his eyes. She leaned tantalizingly close, her lips inches away from his. "Need I remind you that my father lost a lot of merchandise a few years ago? We've all but given up finding it, but a little bird told me you've been asking questions about certain people, and I think you know something new. You've got some fresh clues, haven't you?" Little bird? How the hell would he know anything?" Julie frowned. "No, not that little bird. Birdie's a fucking idiot." "Oh, then which little bird are we talking about?" "You don't need to know." Lucas went through a mental list and came up with the damned parole officer who told him where to find Grace Chadwick. He said, "All right. You said we've almost given up on finding your dad's missing goodies. I guess your twin brother is involved here. So, now that your dad's dead, did you both inherit half each of this highly reputable, legitimate company?" "Don't get too funny, Lucas. My brother will be working for me. Raymond will do as he's told, just like you." Julie disappeared again, doing another slow circle of the chair. Lucas asked her, "Really? Why would I do that? Aside, of course, from the fact that you have me tied to a chair and you're threatening me with torture." Julie whispered into his ear, her breath sweet on his neck, "Because I'll pay you very well." Lucas wasn't expecting that. He'd thought it was more likely Birdie would be called back with his shearing scissors. Playing for time, he said, "This is your idea of a job interview?" "Would you have come otherwise?" Good point, Lucas thought. "Seriously, Julie, it's nice of you to offer, but I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to be on your payroll. What do you really want?" "Why not, Lucas?" She went behind him again and started massaging his neck, pressing her breasts into his shoulders. "It's a straightforward business arrangement. I simply want to pay you for whatever information you find out. I'm not asking you to act on it or do anything illegal. Just pass on what you know. What's the harm in that?" An idea came to Lucas. Maybe he could use this to his advantage. "You'd have to tell me a few things too," he said. The shoulder massage felt good, distracting him. The breasts felt fantastic, getting the attention of something somewhere else on Lucas's body. "What do you mean?" she said. "There are a lot of questions I asked 5 years ago that nobody answered. Telling me now would go a long way towards solving a lot of puzzles much faster." There was a long silence. The massage stopped. Then Lucas heard the unmistakable sound of a switchblade knife being opened. 4 inches of gleaming steel appeared in front of his eyes and slowly lowered towards his throat. Julie said, "Let's make a deal." "Sure, whatever it is. I'm really interested, Lucas said. The knife disappeared under his chin and touched the flesh there, the razor-like edge caressing his skin. Lucas felt the slightest sting as it cut him slightly, drawing blood. Then he felt the cable ties around his wrists parting. Julie moved back in front of him, slowly got down on her knees, pushed his legs apart and knelt between them, staring up at Lucas. Just as he was about to ask exactly what was going to happen next, the switchblade sliced through the tape on his legs. He said, "Oh, that's what you're doing. I thought, Putting a hand on his inner thigh to help herself up, Julie said, "We'll seal our arrangement with a drink. Come this way." Lucas stood up too quickly and fought off cramps and pins and needles in his legs, then hurried to follow. Away from the overhead lamp, the warehouse had some reflected light, but not much. Julie was moving confidently, while Lucas walked warily on a rough concrete floor, hoping not to trip or slip on anything unseen. She took him across to the offices and up a set of steel stairs to the mezzanine level. Pausing on a small balcony, Julie opened a door and gestured for Lucas to join her inside. He was surprised to find himself in a comfortable, well-furnished flat. A large bed dominated one end of the room, with a sofa and huge flat-screen television at the other. A wall unit with a refrigerator, microwave and dishwasher took care of a kitchen. "Very nice," Lucas managed to say, before 2 very large dogs surfaced from behind the bed. They stared at Lucas with expressions that clearly said the monsters were a hair's breadth from becoming a pair of canine killing machines. Suddenly Lucas wished he'd had a shower at home. Just removing the cat-infested clothing wasn't enough. Or was it wishful thinking these brutes only wanted to eat him over some confusion about him stinking of cat's piss? "Go outside and run," Julie said easily. For a horrible moment Lucas thought she was talking to him, and his knees turned to water. The dogs left, giving him warning looks as they passed. She closed the door after them. Lucas almost thanked her and stopped himself in time, his dignity shaken, but not completely in tatters. "Scotch, Lucas?" she asked, going to a cupboard. "Sure, I guess," Lucas said. One of his flaws, he was useless at refusing a free drink. Julie poured 2 hefty slugs in some tumblers, then stood very close to Lucas as she handed one to him. She said quietly, "Here's the deal. You find out everything you can on your own. And if nothing new comes up, I'll think about revealing some of our inside information as a last resort. Agreed?" Something else was treacherously coming up for Lucas. Those amazing breasts were almost touching his chest again. He said weakly, "We can try that, I suppose." "Should we shake on it?" If you like." Julie grabbed a handful of Lucas's crotch and gave it a long squeeze. "I like a firm handshake," she said breathily. "You can tell a lot about a person from their handshake," Lucas nodded. "Just a few more details to go through, okay?" "Right, of course. What sort of details?" Letting go of him and moving back, Julie took off her top to reveal a lace black bra with serious responsibilities. She said, "It's all in the fine print, Lucas." "Fine print, yes. They are very fine prints." "Look, Julie, this may not be the best idea here," Lucas tried, hardly believing what he was saying. A small voice of reason, rapidly drowning in a sea of natural impulses, was telling Lucas that sex with a notorious mob boss's daughter, okay, a dead mob boss, but that was being pedantic, wasn't a smart move. "Is this a better idea?" Julie said, taking off the bra. Lucas couldn't help noting how it sort of sprang away from her body as 2 of the most beautiful things he'd seen in his life, or at least during the last 24 hours, were set free. "It's got merit," he said, needing to clear his throat. "Still, it occurs to me that any kind of business relationship needs to stay on a professional level." She stopped him, holding up a finger to her lips. Lukas used the moment to gulp down most of the scotch and nearly choked. "Let's try this then," Julie said, unzipping her jeans. Lukas could only stare as she bent over, peeling the tight denim off her shapely legs. Only the smallest pair of panties was left. She stood in front of him calmly, letting him look. "Good idea now?" she said. "It might work, now that I see what you're offering. Well, mostly," Lukas croaked. "You're right. I'm not making myself entirely clear," Julie said, slipping off the panties and tossing them into a corner. Then she turned around, leaned over onto the bed and waggled her very shapely bottom at Lukas. Julie said over her shoulder, "I always prefer slapping deals together quickly, don't you? Mind you, don't sign off on our agreement too quickly, or I'll have the boys smash both your kneecaps and throw you in the harbour. Do we understand each other?" Lukas said nervously, undoing his pants, "I'll try not to rush anything. It's too cold to go swimming without any kneecaps." Max and his two cohorts dropped Lukas off in front of his apartment. They'd given him back his shirt, jacket, and surprisingly even his gun. The whole trip was done in silence, and Lukas wondered if they all knew, or maybe resented, what had happened in Julie's flat. Without saying a word, he got out of the car and, as he walked away, the passenger side window dropped down. Max's unpleasant face asked, "Are you going to invite us in for a beer or not?" "Are you serious?" Lukas asked. "It'd be the right thing to do, don't you reckon?" "No, I don't." Greedy prick. The window closed and the car pulled away. Lukas felt bone-tired and half collapsed in the elevator before tramping along the outer balcony to his door. Halfway there, a sing-song voice was impossible to ignore. "Mr. Boston, do you have a minute?" Groaning inside, plastering a smile on his face, Lukas turned to the open door. "Hello, Irene. What can I do for you?" She stalked out, her tall figure trapping him in the narrow space. She reminded Lukas of an outraged ostrich, stooping, her beady eyes fixed on him. "Well, I'm not one to complain, as you know, but someone has raised an issue with me I simply must discuss with you if I'm to take my responsibilities as the Owners' Standards Committee chairperson seriously." "Of course, Irene," Lukas sighed. It didn't matter. Irene was immune to sighs. "Somebody has mentioned that one of your late-night guests drove away with a great deal of noise last night." "Really? What sort of noise?" He thought, she wasn't screaming her name by any chance. "A lot of engine revving and squealing tyres, Mr. Boston. Anybody would think our quiet little street had been turned into a speedway circuit." But how do you know it was someone from my place?" "No one else has guests leaving in the middle of the night, Mr. Boston." She eyed him up and down disapprovingly. "We are all beyond that sort of tomfoolery now." Fighting an urge to loudly explain it was sex, not tomfoolery, Lukas said, "I'll ask my guests to be more considerate, Irene." He risked leaning closer and whispered, "I think it was some kind of emergency. She's a doctor. Lots of rushing around and saving people's lives going on." "Then perhaps she should be sleeping at home, not in some strange man's apartment." Lukas gave up. "I'm sorry. I've really got to get inside. Things to do. I'm sure you understand." He stopped himself, adding, "I've been abducted, tortured and seduced by a girl who smashes your kneecaps if you underperform. I need a shower." "Of course I understand, Mr. Boston, and I hope my message is delivered too." Smiling humorlessly, Irene moved back, letting him pass. "Crystal clear, Irene," Lukas said, pressing past her. It was like pushing through a palpable fog of pure disdain. At his door, Lukas squinted to find the right key. He was just so dog-tired his eyes wouldn't focus. As he shoved the key in, someone knocked once on the door. That was confusing. A single knock. People normally knocked on the outside asking to get in. Lukas was already there and plainly nobody was knocking on anything. Okay, so perhaps someone was inside, knocking to get out. A silly idea. This detective shit was hard when you were feeling like shit. Then Lucas saw the fresh hole in the woodwork. It might have been from termites, but it would have to be a rare type of 7.62mm high-velocity termite. "Oh shit," Lucas said, dropping down behind the balcony wall. "Mr. Boston, are you all right?" Irene chirped from her doorway. She was glaring at him with ill-concealed disgust. No doubt she equated falling to the ground for no apparent good reason a result of poor hygiene and sleeping with loud women. "I'm fine. Please don't bother yourself." Lucas waved at her to stay there. Fleetingly, he considered that Irene wouldn't be the worst collateral damage if she came closer and accidentally copped the sniper's next bullet. But it would complicate all kinds of paperwork. His best move had to be getting inside the apartment unscathed. He reached up and twisted the key, pushing the door open. Lucas scuttled through like a crab and slammed it closed. A neat beam of sunlight pierced the gloom. The bullet had gone through the woodwork. "I always wanted a spy hole," Lucas muttered. Things were going to get very difficult if this sniper ever learned to shoot straight. The bedroom blinds were still closed from that morning, but Lucas went around and pulled all the other drapes and flicked on lights. He wasn't too concerned. Again, the lack of hearing any shot confirmed the sniper was using a silencer, and that still meant professional resources. Pros didn't pot random slugs through curtains. As long as he didn't present an easy target, he should be safe. "But who the hell are you?" he asked a bottle of Jameson's, pouring a stiff slug. "Why don't you ask the right questions?" someone said from in the room. Lucas whirled around, spraying the whiskey in an arc. The ghost of Charles Chuckles Munro was sitting in Lucas's favourite armchair and staring at him expectantly. "Oh, this just gets better," Lucas snapped. "What in God's name are you doing here? Look what you've done. For Christ's sake, this shit cost nearly $50 a bottle." Then he remembered what had occurred a few hours earlier, and he panicked that Chuckles, in his current spiritual state, had somehow witnessed Lucas's naked athletics with Julie, with his daughter being the vaulting horse. Have you been waiting here all the time?" "Negotiations are ongoing," Chuckles told him, and disappeared. "Great. You're a ghostly cliché of yourself," Lucas said, inspecting the chair for who knows what. "An indentation? What was that sticky crap that spirits were supposed to leave behind? Plasma? Or is that the television stuff?" There wasn't a trace of any ghost. No dent, no warm spot. Nothing glowed or came up as an app on his phone. Lucas went back to the Jameson's bottle. He perched on the two-seater sofa, turned on the TV, and ignored the chatter of commercials and talk show hosts while he sipped the whiskey. Lucas thought things through better with background noise blocking out the rest of the world. Chuckles' ghost had only mimicked a well-known Charles Munro quotation. It had been Chuckles' euphemistic thing for saying someone was getting the crap beaten out of them or even being killed. Munro's version of sleeping with the fishes or make him an offer he can't refuse. Some underworld gangland shit that had frankly gotten a little tired. Negotiations are ongoing. Yeah, whatever, Lucas thought. It was silly. Unless, obviously, you were the person being negotiated to the bottom of the ocean with an engine block tied to your ankles. All Lucas cared about was that Chuckles' ghost hadn't been talking directly to him. The voice could have simply been another echo from the past. Still, it was pointless to continue denying everything was connected. Hucknall's ghostly appearances had followed his real resurrection, stepping out of the shadows after being supposedly dead for 5 years. He really was dead now, although only Lucas seemed to know that, apart from Hucknall's killer, assuming he had been murdered. Now bloody Chuckles was dropping by for a chat. It was all Lucas needed. Things were difficult enough. "Oh, damn it," Lucas muttered, suddenly remembering Barbara's missing cat. He stared at his phone and thought about calling her. Nope, he decided, tossing the phone aside. Lucas could imagine trying to explain why Bertie Curran had answered his phone when Barbara called. "I was a bit tied up. Damned clown." Still, it was pretty funny. Now. Back to brainstorming. Hucknall's brief return had stirred up a 5-year-old pot of trouble, and somebody believed that Lukas could make sense of it. So much sense that it was worth shooting him to prevent an outcome that wasn't possible during the original investigation. What the hell could he discover now that wasn't to be found 5 years ago, when a dozen detectives were looking under every drug dealer's bed in town? It was also worth asking, why did someone even think Lukas was going to discover it? He wasn't even a policeman anymore, let alone still on the case. Lukas stared at his glass, glanced at the bottle and thought about working his way to the bottom of it, then resigned himself to the fact that if he wanted to talk to Hucknall's sister, there was no better time than now, at night. After a long shower and a strong coffee, Lukas felt half ready to face the outside world again. He stepped out the front door from sheer habit, checking it was locked behind him, before he remembered the sniper. He froze, believing this would be his last fatal mistake. Nothing happened. Lukas said enviously, "Lucky bastard's at home with his feet up, drinking a cold beer." Chapter 8. Lukas found Shannon Hucknall leaning against the wall in an alley off Elizabeth Street, beside the Black Cat nightclub. Music thudded through the wall. The alley stank of urine, vomit and rotting rubbish. It was also slick with water, because somebody had washed out a trash bin somewhere. The neon lights from the nearby street flickered off the puddles. Despite the cold, Shannon wore a revealing singlet. However, her skirt was longer than most girls in her trade wore. One shapely leg propped her up. "Business okay, Shannon?" Lukas asked, offering a cigarette. She looked at him as if they'd last seen each other only the day before, although it had been 5 years. Shannon took the cigarette, saying, "It's a bit early for cripples. They need a gutful of piss before they find some courage." "But you're doing all right." "Some bastard ran his wheelchair over my toes last night. Hurt like hell. They're the only ones I've got." Lukas told her, "You should wear boots. Well, one boot anyway." Shannon was a one-legged hooker who specialised in servicing clients who likewise weren't entirely in one piece, one way or another. Most of the local prostitutes weren't picky about their customers, but with her own amputation, Shannon had a niche market. Lukas was surprised she still plied her trade in places like this. She had a good list of regulars. "Give me a break, Lukas," she said. "Pay $300 for a pair of boots and I only get to wear one." "Well, can't you find a friend who's got a right leg and the same size foot?" Lukas added lamely. She sighed. "Are you paying, pretending or just pissing about? A cigarette doesn't get you nothing, you know. But hey, look at this," she said with sudden enthusiasm. Shannon took out a mobile phone and showed him the screen. "I can take credit cards right here. Modern technology. Isn't it awesome?" Lukas peered at the phone. "Even American Express?" Shannon frowned. "Yeah, I know. The thieving bastards take 3%. "You need to change banks." She nodded seriously at the phone, agreeing. "So, are you up for something? I'll give you a discount to make up for the Amex fee. Can't believe you're coming to me, though. Nice-looking bloke like yourself." She peered at him closely. "You haven't got anything wrong with you now? I don't do communicable diseases, you know. Just cripples and chronic conditions." "I'm fine, Shannon," Lukas said quickly. "I'm after something else. Have you seen your brother lately?" Lukas watched her defences go up as Shannon put her phone away. She said warily, "You've come out of the woodwork for that. I suppose you already know, since you've come here asking questions." "Something like that," Lukas lied, thinking he wouldn't go to hell for not being completely honest with a one-legged prostitute. She asked him, "What do you want with Gavin?" "Not much, don't worry. I'm more interested in anything he might have told you." "Like what?" "Like where he's been for the last 5 years for a start." She shook her head. "He only wanted to see I was doing okay. I didn't pry, it's none of my business. We had a few beers and talked over old times, and that was it. Funny seeing him with no hair, though." Lukas remembered Grace Chadwick had mentioned this. It felt somehow significant, but he couldn't think why. "Okay," he said. "When did you last see him?" "Only last week." The same time frame. Lukas wasn't learning anything new. He tried, "He didn't say anything that might give us a clue where he's been hiding." "Nope," she said. "I told you." A group of youths walked past the alley entrance, seeing Lukas and Shannon as they passed. One of them yelled out, "Buying a dose of the pox, mate. Your mother's going to be so disappointed." Shannon said quickly before Lukas could react, "Don't worry, he's a regular. He just says shit like that so his friends don't know." "What sort of condition has he got?" Lukas scowled after them, tempted to shove his fist down the guy's throat. "He's a chronic fucking idiot." "Okay, I guess that's not contagious, so he qualifies." Lukas took $50 out of his wallet. "Look, thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it." He wasn't just being charitable. $50 wasn't much to give away, and it bought him a friendly set of eyes and ears on the street. That could be invaluable. Shannon looked at the money without taking it. She said, "I've got a better idea." "Really, I'm good. I just took a very nice girl home the other day." She cut him off. "I need a favour instead of money. Nothing much, but you're the perfect guy." Lukas was struck by the sudden vulnerability on Shannon's face. She was normally hard and uncompromising, accepting no pity. "Sure, if I can," Lukas shrugged. "My landlord's being a little prick. He won't fix the elevator in our block because he wants to get rid of me. Reckons forcing me and my clients to use the stairs will drive me out. It's killing my business. It's killing me," she admitted reluctantly. 4 floors in a shitty stairwell on crutches is hell. It explained why she was back on the street. Lukas said, "You want me to talk to him?" "I'd really appreciate it, Lukas. I'll owe you heaps. Maybe Gavin coming back was an omen bringing you here. I don't know anyone else who hasn't got a brittle bones or is always too short of breath, or has enough legs to kick the bastard properly." "Consider it done," Lukas said, a small catch in his throat. The world had been cruel enough to people like Shannon. "He's always home. He never leaves. He's one of those computer geeks who plays games and shit all day and night. Ground floor flat, number 1. "Tomorrow," Lukas said. "It's a promise." A rattling sound came from the head of the alley. Lukas saw the silhouette of a figure in a wheelchair. It stopped, uncertain. Lukas gave a half wave that was meant to convey he was leaving. "That's Rodney," Shannon explained. "I just sit on his lap and it's all over in a few minutes. Wish he'd get some decent wheels on that thing. Hard as hell on my ass." "I'll leave you to it," Lukas said, putting a business card and the $50 in her hand in a way she couldn't refuse. "I'll fix the landlord tomorrow. Call me if he doesn't do as he's told." This is the end of part 1 of Dead Wrong. Part 2, which is the rest of the book, is already recorded and ready to go. I just have to upload it and get everything prepared. In the meantime, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know what you think of Dead Wrong, the story and its characters, narration. That way I know how much to prioritise getting part 2 up and running. Please leave a comment or subscribe to the channel or go to my website and get in contact with me there. And thanks for listening to Dead Wrong Part 1.